And now, a story from the Appleseed.
So I like to tell all different kinds of stories, and this particular genre of story that I'm about to tell, it is one that it doesn't get told as often as you would think it does, which is weird because it's the only type of story I know of that people are dying to hear. It's a eulogy. Here's what happened. I went down to visit my Aunt True and my Uncle Faltz. For those of you who do not know, my Aunt True and Uncle Faltz live in a trailer park called Big Fib Trailer Park Cul-de-sac. It's a trailer park in the shape of a giant cul-de-sac in a town called Big Fib. And Big Fib is a very different town than the one I was born in. I was born in a small Alabama town called Pensacola, Florida. And Big Fib Trailer Park Cul-de-sac is a very different trailer park than the trailer park I factually grew up in. And Aunt True and Uncle Faltz are, without question, the two wisest family members I have ever made up. Now, I love going down there to collect stories from them, so I was down there just hanging out with them for 3 nights. And on the 3rd night while I was there, they lived like 4 trailers in to the cul-de-sac, but on the far side, one of the old-timers died. Now, I never met that man. So I just thought the best thing I could do was go ahead and pack up my things and drive away and let them as a community mourn for their loved one. So I drove away. You can imagine my surprise then, 3 days later, when Uncle Faltz called me on the phone, asked me if I would write that man's eulogy. Said that since I didn't know him, I would be unbiased. Which, under the circumstances, I thought maybe he mispronounced unqualified, but no. Uncle Faltz said, listen here, boy, we all knew him. So we all know what we would say about him. You understand? Over the years, we said plenty about him. I mean, he lived a long time and talked for all of it. So we just want to hear a few stories about the man we ain't already heard 17 dozen times already. Also, I don't know if you can smell what I'm putting down here or not, boy, but we didn't like him much. So when you are writing this eulogy, sprinkle in some not so nice things in there. And then just resolve it good at the end. Because they ain't nothing worse, son. They ain't nothing worse than folk who were nicer to people in death than they were in life. So, to honor the wishes of Uncle Faltz and Aunt True, without any further research, I present to you this eulogy. A celebration of the made-up life of Melvin V. Odroit. Melvin Vernon Odroit, until his final day, considered himself an innovator. He was the kind of fellow that succeeded at nothing except for happiness. He failed at everything except for happiness. And he wasn't lazy. You need to understand, he meticulously crafted every single one of those failures. And for that reason, I will always have nothing but undying respect for the man his friends called Mel Odroit. Born and raised in Thousand Sticks, Kentucky, Melvin Vernon Odroit grew up hearing his mother's mantra. Virtually every day she would say, if you want to be an innovator, son, you got to do things in a way no one's ever done them before. Well, Mel heard his mother's mantra, but we've all had this experience in our lives where you'll hear something for a couple of years or for decades sometimes before it hits you what it actually means. Melvin heard his mother's mantra every day, but he never seemed to take in the crucial fact that, y'all, innovators are supposed to improve things. Let me give you an example. Whittling. Mel took up whittling at the age of 16, and townsfolk thought this was a lovely idea. The image in their head of this lanky young man in an oversized flannel, sitting in a rocking chair, dulling his knife, trying to make something out of nothing. Listen to that. Dulling your knife, trying to make something out of nothing. Townsfolk thought that sounded like a beautiful metaphor for a young person's life. Dulling your knife, trying to make something out of nothing. Townsfolk thought that whittling would keep Mel busy. They were correct. Townsfolk thought that whittling would keep Mel out of trouble. Nope. Because Mel was an innovator first. He wasn't just a normal whittler. He was an innovative whittler. He didn't take a log and then whittle it into a wooden horse. He didn't take a log and whittle it into a wooden whistle. No. He took a log, whittled it into a small pile of shavings, and then gave the pile of shavings a title. Because he thought it was modern art. The first one he made, he called it, "Whittle Me This." People thought that was cute. He started raising eyebrows all around town whenever he made a pretentiously large pile and called it, "This is how much a woodchuck could." There's a beautiful photo of Mel sitting in a giant pile of shavings that had very recently been his rocking chair. The Great Dust Storm of 1946 began as the First Baptist Church's front porch. People got concerned. And how could they not have been concerned? I mean, hand railings, y'all, and park benches just started disappearing left and right, just turned into modern ephemeral art that took flight on the wind, and the City Hall building was made of pine. The town council and the mayor got together secretly one night. They had a vote, and that is how, in the town of Thousand Sticks, Kentucky, whittling became a felony. Mel and his mama decided they should leave town, so they left their half-carved-up home behind, and they headed north. I wish we had time in this eulogy to discuss Mel's young adulthood, some of the exploits he got into in his life, but we don't have time for that. I want to talk about later on in his life when he met a wonderful woman named Ima, and they settled into their lives together as pig farmers. This was right in the era, right before all of y'all met him in Big Fib Trailer Park cul-de-sac. Now, most of y'all know that Mel and Ima Odroit were famous pig farmers because Mel and Ima Odroit famously added so many phrases to the pig farming lexicon. You all know that. So let's talk about a couple things maybe not everybody knows. Mel and Ima Odroit's farmhouse was built right on top of the time zone line, which a lot of people thought was wild. Like, what a terrible idea. One room in a different time zone than another room. It would get so confusing. It was perfect for them because Ima would go out tending to the pigs, and she'd stay out so late that she'd come home late for the dinner that Mel had made for them. But it was fine because the dining room was an hour behind the kitchen, which meant the food always stayed hot an extra 60 minutes. They lived in that house happily for 40 years. Here's another misconception. We always say Mel and Ima Odroit. Mel and Ima Odroit were famous pig farmers. Now, Ima was a great pig farmer. She had one flaw as a pig farmer, and that was it. Mel had nothing but flaws as a pig farmer. The truth is, Mel was just kind of bored. I mean, as is often the case in our lives, we have a tendency to replace old habits with new vices. And this is what Mel did. Mel gave up whittling a long time ago, right? But he did this terrible thing. He took up small-time gambling, which is a bad idea now, but it was a terrible idea back then because back then, most states had banned dice and cards. So there were all these dangerous, weird, underground rural gambling rings that had cropped up around thumb wrestling and rock, paper, scissors and the floating arm trick. We all know what the floating arm trick is. The floating arm trick is like children play it now, where they'll stand in a small doorway. They'll press their arms out against the doorway for 60 seconds. They'll count to 60. They step out of the doorway, relax their arms, and their arms rise against their will. Yeah, they don't play it in Vegas anymore. But the point is, Mel would get together with his farmer friends on a Saturday night. And one of them would stand in a small doorway and press his arms out against the doorway, while the rest of the farmers would all sit in a circle, and they would count to 60 while they bet quarters on how high that farmer's arms would rise against his will before he regained control of his arms. Yeah, it's a terrible idea. Mel was very good at the game, though. He had heavy hands. Also, he was just lucky, and he would have to be to get through his life the way he was. He was lucky. He just always walking around with his pockets bulging full of those surreptitious, clandestine floating arm trick quarters. Ima's one flaw that I mentioned earlier. Winters. Every winter, Ima and Mel lost 10% or more of their pigs. Every winter, either to frostbite or the pigs suffered from swine seasonal affective disorder. Every winter, they just lost 10% or more of their pigs, and they did not know what to do. And at one point, Ima turned to Mel and said, well, do you have an idea? And Mel said, yeah, I got an idea. I'm an innovator. Stack them. Stack them, one right on top of another. That was his idea. Stacking the pigs. The idea being that the body heat of the pig beneath and above would keep the pig stacked warm all winter long. And it worked. They didn't lose a single pig that entire winter. They had stacks of 11. They had hundreds of pigs in stacks of 11 all over their fields. Just hundreds of pigs. You put a 12th one up there, you can get a leaning tower of pigs, and it upsets the neighbors. But hundreds of pigs, stacks of 11 all over the fields, and they didn't lose a single pig all winter until spring sprung. Now, when spring sprung, of course, it came time to unstack the pigs. Y'all, you would think with all of that floating arm trick that Mel had played in his life, you would think with those years of playing floating arm trick, Mel would have realized you cannot wait an entire season, an entire winter, and then unstack the top 9 pigs off of those bottom 2 pigs and not expect those bottom 2 pigs to just float off into the sky, just like your arms do. Poor Mel and Ima Odroit were just standing there just watching their bottom 2 pigs float off into the sky. The pigs were just going, ay, 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 ay. That's the noise that pigs make when pigs fly. They go oink on the ground. They go, ay, 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 whenever they fly. And of course, we all know they go, wee, 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 all the way home. They were flummoxed, Mel and Ima. They had no idea what to do. That was the horrible spring morning, though, that they coined the terms piggyback ride and when pigs fly, and also, unfortunately, hog heaven. They lost so many pigs. They tried everything to weigh them down. They tried everything. Mel, at one point, you know how the term piggy bank was coined? Mel went home, got all of those surreptitious, clandestine floating arm trick quarters, brought them back, started feeding them to the bottom 2 pigs to try to weigh them down. Yeah, but guess what, y'all? Money can't solve all your problems. It was Ima who realized the solution to this problem. It was Ima who realized the solution to every problem in their lives, let's just face it. Ima was the one who said, if we want to keep our pigs warm all winter long, what we got to do is put a pig in a blanket. She copyrighted the term, and Mel and Ima lived off the modest residuals of mediocre dinner parties for years and years and years and years and years and years to come. Sweet Ima Odroit died suddenly in 2003. It was a surprise. She was in great health. Mel had gone out to water the pigs. He came back inside, and he just found Ima dead on the kitchen floor. So he thought fast, and he dragged her body into the dining room because in that time zone, Ima wasn't dead yet. Her eyes popped open. And the couple who had spent 40 years living and working together got 46 extra minutes to say goodbye. Mel took her outside. They laughed and they cried. They held hands and they told each other stories while Mel sat on her the entire time, which I know sounds weird. But listen, this is the story that taught me to absolutely never judge the way anybody deals with death. Because when Ima's time came, 46 minutes later, when Ima's time came, Mel simply stood up. And Ima and Mel said that's the last he ever saw of her. I know my death will not be nearly as magnificent as Ima Odroit's. But y'all, I hope when I go, I feel that loved. Melvin was heartbroken, and he sold the farm and all the pigs, and he moved to Big Fib Trailer Park cul-de-sac, which is where y'all know him from. He died recently, with a smile on his face, having lived a beautiful, unique, weird, singular, interesting existence. He's the kind of fellow that succeeded at nothing except for happiness. He failed at everything except for happiness. And for whatever reason, most of us just do not aspire to live that way. But Melvin Vernon Odroit was always an innovator.
Thanks for joining us for a story from the Appleseed.